Good morning. This video, and I'm going to make, well, at least 2 videos about this, is playing to a click track, or practicing to a click track. Click track originally was a brand. If I'm not mistaken, it was like a brand of a metronome, like a digital metronome. Kind of like, I want a Coke. Well, do you want a Coca-Cola or a soda or a pop or whatever the hell you call them, and what region of the country you're in. But, and this is probably funny to younger people, when dinosaurs like myself pull out an apparatus such as this. You know what I mean? It's like I was making a video on a cell phone, but I pulled out like a rotary. Like, well, this is what you do, right? A lot of folks have these. These are great. Timer rhythm watches. There's metronomes up the wazoo, but everybody knows too. Here I am even on my dinosaur cell phone, my iPhone 4, which is like driving a Model T. Metronome apps. But here's the point, okay? Metronomes, perfect time. I've gone into this in other videos. Perfect time, and I don't want to make this a I'm pro perfect time or anti perfect time, because God knows the CD I made, this one here, Terry Keating Greatest Hits, which can be had on numerous media platforms, as well as eBay, where I sell it, so maybe if you want to buy it there. A song was on the radio, but here, anyway, check this out. Practicing to a metronome, I know people will talk about, they will say, oh, like, it's scary, or, you know, there's a lot of people, because what happens is, like, the first time you ever really play to one, or in my case, I remember the first time I ever, I mean, I had farted around with a metronome when I was a kid, you know, playing drums and stuff, but years and years went by, and suddenly a band I was in, like, hey, let's record a wet record, let's go over to Warzone in Chicago, which, by the way, the Warzone we recorded at, I think the board was I think it was a Neve, but anyway, it was the board that they recorded Dan, 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 Eye of the Tiger on. And I remember one of the texts said, that board has so many bugs it has roaches. Yeah, 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 yeah. Anyway, we got a good sounding record out of there. Anyhow, a metronome, okay? So what I'm going to do here, I have my Timer rhythm watch, which I bought back in the 50s. Or I also, like everybody else has, especially younger folk of today, have metronome apps, right? The point is, here's the thing. What makes it difficult sometimes for drummers is the fact that we play discrete notes in Metronomeville, to a regular run-of-the-mill standard metronome click track. I'm not talking about now when people sequence, and God love them, they sequence stuff, so the click track they played was like, you know what I'm saying? Which is a lot easier to play to, because it's musical, and there's also a lot of reference points, okay? So, and you know, it's interesting, you know, a lot of, well, I'm not even going to go into the Phil Collins thing afterward. We'll do that afterward, right? Okay, so a click track. Now what happens here, my feeling actually is people actually with really, really good time, I think sometimes we'll have a hard time playing a metronome, because, at least at first, because sometimes you want to hear it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you always kind of want to hear it, and if you're right on it, you don't hear it. And I know with me, I have anxiety. I was like, where's that click track? And anyway, back to the record that I recorded with these guys. It was like, hey, you know, we're going to use a click track. I was like, okay, so we went in, and we recorded. Of course, we did the drums in like an afternoon. You know, we recorded like 10 tunes. Le quoi? No, I'm not. I don't represent these people marketing-wise. But it is delicious, although a little hyper-carbonated. So look what people, most people have some sort of a gastric thing, or, you know, the O-ring in your chest or whatever. It just kind of makes it like Mount St. Helens. You're going to blow. So cut down a little on the carbonation. Anywho, what happens, and what happened to me is suddenly in the studio, faced with, you know, everybody here, like, here we go, everybody, put on your cans, you know what I mean? Put on your headphones, and here it comes. So this is 1994, right? So, I mean, like, Roland 808s and 909s did exist. I mean, everyone had the capacity in those days to program a click track, but essentially, usually what happens is you have that everybody plays to, right? I was fortunate enough, by the way, to have the guitar player in the band, who was kind of a total Nazi. Not literally, but, you know, kind of, anyway, good musician, though. He played to a click track terrifically, which made it a lot easier for me and the rest of the band. So there's a couple things here that I'm trying to get at in all seriousness. So sit back, watch the video. Instead of giving you some pre-packaged format like blah, 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 there's two things. Practicing to a metronome will obviously make you better at playing to a metronome, and then of course if you go in the studio and use a click track, okay? But whether that or not that ever happens, practicing to a metronome is great because any instrument you practice to, whether piano or whatever, it's great to practice to a metronome because it of course will round out any little passage or rudiment or little thing that when you first learn, it's hard to play it in perfect time because you're just learning the pattern, right? And eventually, once you kind of get the pattern or the rudiment, in our case, down, or the fill or whatever, practicing to a metronome will shore it up to your natural sense of time, right? But as it goes to record with the metronome, in these days it's a little different because now we have quantizing, right? I mean, I was in the studio, there's a place called Gravity downtown in Chicago, and I went in and the engineer was helping out recording a song for this lady, and he went in and he played for like 10 seconds to the metronome, right? And he was off it all over the joint, you know. It was like, you know, but, you know, click, quantize, sounded good, right? Or perfect. So there's a couple different angles I'm going to go here. My advice to practice with the metronome, but also to sort of the concept of metronome doom in perfect time, okay? So let's go into the practicing with the metronome first. And it's going to be quick in that angle because let's put it this way. Especially with drums, you don't need to practice to a metronome while playing the drums, okay? Sometimes you can just practice to it. What I'll do sometimes, if there's a new song I've learned, or if somebody's going to be like, hey, let's go this in the studio and record this, I'll have the song, I'll memorize the song and just run it through my head, and I'll put it on the car. You know, you have the Bluetooth in the car, so out of my car speakers, you hear this. So you can, and it helps, honestly, if you sing to it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a ba 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 da 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 da. Okay, what happens? Let me slow that down a little. What happens though is you internalize the metronome. Okay, you don't necessarily have to be playing on a snare drum. Dot 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 dot. Okay, you don't have to be doing that. Okay, you can practice to a metronome or a click track or a sequencer or whatever. It helps to really develop your sense of time. It is great to practice to a straight up metronome because you then have to rely on keeping your stuff even through space. Okay, so it is a lot easier, or I find it a lot easier, to record or track to a drum machine because it's more musical. It fits our natural brain anyway. Okay? Then just, okay? So here's my advice right off the bat. Let me go right into the first portion of what I'm talking about. It's just practicing to a metronome. Again, it's great to practice to one at your drum set, but again, you don't have to be at a drum set. Even if you're any type of musician, a sax player, a pianist, or whatever, you can practice just, if you're at all musical, or even not, just listen to it. You don't have to sit there and be like, and that's one thing too, what a lot of people do is they get all nervous because they want to be like, you know, like, there it is, there it is. Don't think of it like that. It's almost kind of like, it's a lot like, here's an analogy. I know I'm always like or as or metaphor, simile. Imagine riding a bike. There you are riding a bike, right? Or in a car, I suppose. But on a bike we'll do it because there's a lot more straight up hand control directly, apart from power steering or whatever. Honestly, bear with me here. Really though. When you're on a bike, there's straight up control. Your balance via your hands and your weight and everything, okay? Imagine a yellow painted line straight down a very flat street, or Salt Lake or whatever, where they tested the blue flame before it exploded into thousands of bits, or I don't even know if it did. And you just ride your bike on it. Well, if you sit there and you're all nervous and you're sort of just looking down watching the yellow line, you're going to be like, but what happens is if you sort of relax and sort of don't think about right off the bat you have to be right on it, just kind of get it into your, if you've never really practiced to one before, even if you have, just pop it on and just kind of play. Okay, just kind of, eventually what will happen is, you could say on one hand that maybe your anxiety to listening to it is going to go away, but it is really helpful. Like anything we learn, we do it over and over again, okay? Anything you want to get better at, you just do a lot of, okay? Even stuff you hate doing. I always have the analogy of like having a kid clean their room. Well, they hate it. God, I even still hate it now. But after a while, kids will learn stuff. After a while, they'll learn to pick the clothes up first because they realize through falling over the clothes a couple times or the shoes, they better do that first because then it makes it easier to move on to the next stuff, like dusting if they dust, or moving their little army guys into the box, or whatever the hell it is. But seriously, it's true, okay? So no matter what you do, the more you do of it, the better you get. And it kind of honestly like a micro sort of evolutionary sort of way. It's just sort of built, the more you do stuff, the better you get, okay? It's the same with playing or practicing to a metronome. The mechanism of playing to a metronome, to round out the thing you want to get better at, i.e. a fill, or a rudiment, or just keeping time, or a cool sort of offbeat thing, or independence, it is a structure that you're riding on to sort of internalize playing these things in a musical fashion. Moxie playing or something. Jesus. In a musical fashion, right? But thereby the mechanism itself, the learning tool, the thing that helps you along, the crutch, the something itself you have to practice to, just even to get used to, okay? So even before you start applying it to the drum set or an instrument, it's good just to internalize it. Really, in your car, be driving down the street, you can be like, and again, honestly, you can tap on the wheel, do each hand. Like my left hand, as I know, it's like somebody else's left hand. It's all funky, but really is helpful to practice each limb separately. But that's beside the point. The point is that you can practice to a metronome or a click track without playing your instrument. Okay, and it helps even if you sing to it. Okay, even if you learn fills, you can sing to them. Bum 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 boom ba dum ba ba bum 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 boom. Ba boom ba 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 boom boom da da do 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 boom ba boom 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 ba ba boom 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 ba ba boom ba ba bum 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 ba. Okay, it really does help. As much as crazy as I appear, which I probably am, it really does help. Okay. Plus, if you're in the car, you don't have to necessarily be tapping. You can just be singing. Dun, 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 dun. Don't even have to be melodic. Dun, dun, dun. You can just be like. Ba 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 da ga da ga da 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 ga da ga da ga da 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 da. Okay, you can do that orally, okay? And it's very helpful. I'm going to say it again. It is truly very helpful to do that. Don't write that off right now. Like, dude, you know what you're talking about, man. You freaking suck. Okay, whether I suck or not, I can assure you that this is helpful. It truly is. In your car, put your Bluetooth, put your iPhone or whatever the device you have, and just put it on the car. It might seem boring at first. You might be driving down the street, it might be like, tick, 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 and after a while you might want to take your phone and just whip it out the window. But just really, the more you're exposed to it, the better you'll internalize it, okay? So now, I have to say this though. I am going to make a video where I am playing to the click track, so you'll be able to hear while I play, okay? And I will demonstrate certain ways that it's honestly sort of there's a lot of information there, because different methods they used to do over the years, where sometimes certain drummers, you play around it a little, okay? You can hold the time back a little. You could, sometimes when you come out of a fill, sometimes it's good to sort of hold the time back a little, because it gives it sort of a nice beefy quality, like a nice, I won't even necessarily say a human quality, but just anyway, my point being that I will make a video, and it will be higher quality. I will have to figure out a way to do it, but honest to God, I'm really gonna, even if I have to go into a frickin' studio and pay money up the wazoo to do it. I will do that, okay? But take my word for it, it is helpful to practice or just expose yourself to a metronome, okay? A click track. Some device that gives you a pulse, a discrete pulse, okay? Now, again, part and parcel. It's great to practice. You can practice, too, to a drum machine that has all kinds of references and it's musical. That's very helpful, too. But it's also very helpful to really... This is sort of the... This is like the old school way. If you really want to get it in there, like wrap your knuckles. Practice to a metronome. Forget about that 808 or that 909 or that whatever the hell it is. This is very good because it really... It's harder to do, especially the less beats you have, right? Now, just to practice to it, again, I mean, there's no reason to torture yourself and go into a studio and say, well, we're going to do the song to 85 beats per minute. So typically what you do, again, is you pop on maybe that's a quarter note, you pop on an eighth note. Okay? Or if you want to be like, yeah, I'm going to be extreme click track, man. I'm going to take that 85 and break it down to... Let's say it's 86, okay, so we can cut the frickin' thing in half. We'll break it down to 43, okay? Torture yourself. So then yeah, I do it to 43 because it'll be like, yeah. I mean, you can really do that, really, to quiz yourself or really put yourself in the ringer if you really... Doug, 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 Doug. And it's a lot easier to do that too if you are singing like I recommend, or orally doing it, or tapping in the car, because you can really hear it. Sometimes when you're actually on the drums, it kind of is sometimes hard to hear it unless you really blast it in your headphones. Okay. So now we're going to move on from this. That is the first part of the video, just telling you, at least in the short run, without playing your instrument, or in our case, a drum set, playing to a metronome, you don't have to be on your instrument. Okay. Again. Real fast, play, you know, the standardized stuff. Quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. Generally speaking, just do those. That's sort of like your even numbered stuff, right? Doug, bop, 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 dugga, 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 dugga. Okay, but then it's always good. And there's a lot of other things. You know, there's 64th notes, and there's this, and you can play 5s, and you can do 7s. But for now, just to get used to it, just do your standard quarters. Your eighth notes. Or sing it. And you'll find, obviously, the slower you go, with the bigger gap between it, it's a little harder to get. You kind of got to spend some time doing it because you got to really internalize that time. Okay, this is at 63 now. Okay, on a quarter note. So, but then it is also helpful, real quick, and I will in the other video I make where I'm actually playing the drums, where you can really hear the metronome. Okay, while I play, go through, do your quarters, into eighths. Into triplets, okay? Practice that interval between doing quarters, the big pulse, and dividing it by 2, and then putting in triplets, okay? So like quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, eighth, 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 16, 16, it's hard to say that fast. Okay, kind of fart around in there. You don't necessarily have to put it in a straight way where you feel like, okay, well now, all right, now I got to spend another 20 minutes going from, you know, quarters to eighths. It's really helpful if you sort of do it sort of organically and just kind of sit. You can just fart around and do what's comfortable. Okay, try doing. You know, do your quarter notes into eighths and then go into triplets. It's easier to go in from eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 into da 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 da. In general, I think, especially at slower tempos. And then you can also go from eighth notes or those eighth note triplets da 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 into a 16th note triplet, okay, like the, okay. But the point is that I'm trying to make, you can really practice and shore up your time to a click track or a metronome. You don't need a drum set. You can do it in the car. You can, when you're going for a walk, when you're working out. Honest to God, it is. You really can. You'll internalize it, okay. So, but here's another thing too with the notion of the click track and perfect time. I've talked about this before in other videos. And part of the thing, to be honest, it's something I really love about Bonham's playing. And in general, and I know a lot of younger drummers or musicians, you know, or diehard chops people will be like, I mean, and it's a matter of personal taste. You know, some people really love time that's in perfect quantized time, okay? My personal take on a click track for recording is, generally speaking, the way I love to do it is to sit and everybody needs to be a good musician. You need to have played together long enough to where you really, like certain people, when you play well to each other, that's when it sounds solid. Whether or not it's in atomic clock perfect time or not, okay? Stuff in the old days, you know, up through the 90s, I shouldn't even say, you know, they started using metronomic type things. You know, it's hard to say. You know, Les Paul, when he did his stuff, he might have been playing to a metronome just for fun because he was such a magician, a wizard at playing his thing. But I think what started to happen was people maybe generally didn't have the best time in the world. So somebody had the idea, well, have him play along to a metronome. But the fact of the matter is, if you have bad time, you're not going to play to a click track well, okay? So the whole thing is really not even so much to make you play kind of solid time, but like kind of human perfect time, okay? Now I've said in other videos, even if the guru of metronomedom, of click trackdom, goes through and plays to a metronome for a 5-minute song, they're not going to be on it perfectly exactly the whole time. It ain't going to happen. Okay, human beings we're organic, we're circles. I'm getting all Matt McConaughey on you. We're circles, we're organic, we're not squares, we're not rigid, it's the nature of being human. But it's not a cop-out, okay, it's not. I love listening to recordings when it's great listening to recordings where a lot of that stuff is to a click track, and musicians, what they did is they played to it, and they played, I mean, like 99.7 on it, because it sounds human. To me personally, there's something funky about when something snaps to a grid, music-wise. And it can be argued that because I'm from the era before quantizing or making stuff absolutely perfect via computer, or in the old days maybe with tape or drum machines, perfect time, okay? And it's but even in music, like with symphonies and stuff, I mean, the nature of music is, and again, it's not a cop-out. I think having the ability to play great to a click track is great. It's awesome. And there's definitely certain styles of music that we become accustomed to, and certain natures, certain songs that the composer might really want perfect time. But, you know, as I've said before, symphonies, everybody in a symphony, they don't record. The whole thing from point A to point Z is in 108 beats per second, okay? What happens is, when everybody is playing together, okay, and I mean together, not kind of sort of together, but as much as humanly possible together, it sounds nice, okay? That's just the essence of listening to great music. It sounds cohesive. Again, as it relates to Zeppelin, and back in the day when they record, with or without a click track, essentially what happens is once everybody, even if they play together with or without a click track, ultimately then, because the drums are a discrete note arrangement, that becomes the click track. It becomes the grid, the framework, the skeleton that everything is then based upon. As long as then the drums and the guitar, at the very least, the basic rhythm bed, the basic bass guitar, maybe the basic guitar or piano, are locked in with the drums, okay? In a very smooth way. Not if there's any like little, like where somebody just jumps back to, that's when it sounds smooth. And I won't just necessarily say human, but it sounds musical, okay? That is the key. There's a lot of, Bonham and Page, great producers know this. You play to the drummer. Okay, there's a lot of stuff, apart from even Zeppelin or other bands, the Police or whatever, you hear there's, you know, the choruses that they speed up, or you know, which is sometimes the nature of a chorus. When everybody gets excited and it's here, we're in the chorus, you're not necessarily speeding up just because, oh, it's a defect. I just, for whatever reason, I don't know why, I just want to speed up. Well, sometimes it's exciting. It's human nature and exciting maybe to speed it up a little. It's wired in us, okay? And then, as I said before, coming back into a verse, it's kind of nice to, within maybe about a bar and a half, to subtly bring it down a little. Not a discrete like boom ba dum da da ba dum ba dum ba dum bum ba. Okay, little jars of time are very obvious, and they never got by back in the old day with producers' ears, and certainly not now. But the point being that if you're gonna record to a metronome, here's the thing, and I know there's a lot to it, but my point is this: in this day and age, okay, if you're going to go in the studio and you're worried about playing to a click track, because there's a quantized switch or concept, don't worry about it. Do the best you can, because if they snap it on the grid, it's not going to make a difference whether you play to it 70% or 90% or whatever. Do you understand? Seriously, don't worry about it. Back in the day, when they did everything analog into tape, or before the concept of, you know, the quantization, where you could really, I'm starting to get all manic. Flicking a switch, everything goes tick, okay? In the old days of computers, okay, before quantization, they could really go through and like physically move the notes to where you would see the click track pulse on your computer screen. You could actually physically manually do that, okay? Even then, technically speaking, if somebody did that manually looking at a screen, there's a human being doing it. Okay, so they still might not exactly perfectly line up consistently, even though it's so subtle. And in my opinion, I think human beings can hear that. At the very least, human beings who weren't weaned or brought up on, like nowadays, a lot of the younger folks are so, all the music they've really ever heard has been either quantized or is a machine, a drum machine that they put music to. And maybe they're just used to it. Maybe to them it really does sound musical. I don't know. Maybe to them when they hear like a Rolling Stone song, the first thing is, God, this is so sloppy. But I don't think so. Because there's such a renaissance of older music becoming so popular with kids. The point being, so as it goes then with playing to a metronome, if you're going to go in the studio and play to a click track, if you're going to do a click track, if you're not going for the Steely Dan type thing or the 70s thing where you get it as perfectly as human possible, where you're not actually going to move any notes or quantize it, but you want to get everybody to play as perfectly to the click track as possible, but in a nice musical way, then maybe you have enough to worry, or at least get your shite in a pile and get to the point where you can really play well in music with a couple other musicians to a click track. But even then, in those days, they cut and splice tape all the time. They did. If a beat was off, they'd cut and splice the tape. Which then, by the way, was still done by hand by human beings, which aren't robotically, absolutely, digitally perfect, okay? In the old days, they'd go through the tape machine, and that one discrete note on tape at 30 inches per second or 15 inches per second. But if you slow it way down to do the edit, what they do is they'd have the wheels. It would run through a tape head, right? And be like... You'd have some guy who's a pro at doing it. You find exactly where to splice the tape as best he could, 99.8%. It still sounds, when you hear like Steely Dan stuff, or stuff back in the day, where they're playing, where pros are playing as best they can to a metronome, it still sounds human, at least to me. And a lot of younger folks and scientists right now would say, well, actually, Terry, you know, that's a fallacy, even though most people believe it, because, you know, since you've been weaned on it so much, it's just what your brain's used to. That's entirely possible. But I don't think it's the case. Again, I made the analogy or the simile or the comparison or the whatever the hell it is to buildings made back in the day that were designed by hand, people with rulers and stuff, architects, and then built by hand. They look perfect. But what happens is when you have machines design stuff, even machines build stuff, there's something about perfection. 100, once you snap from 99.99 in mathematics as you approach something, it looks, well, like it's still art in a weird ways. You get perfect 99.997, 99.998, 99.9999995, you know what I mean? But once you snap it to perfect, there's something about it to me I don't think it's necessarily ugly, but I think I can tell the difference. Or at least it seems like. Edit! Sorry about the edit. Oh my god, jarring edit. Sorry, I ran out of juice. But what I was saying was, when you're playing organically to a click track, if there's a time you slightly maybe come out in a fill or something, you're a little ahead or a little behind it. And pros back in the day would do this all the time, because it would still... Remember, the whole point of a metronome is to keep you really from speeding up or slowing down, okay? Not necessarily in the modern sense of fitting everything into a perfect pocket that you're going to quantize on, okay? It's really more of like a, what the hell am I trying to say? Kind of like a, Jesus, I don't know. But the point being is that if you come out a little ahead, you can very slowly come back to it, because people won't notice it. A human being really won't. If it's done properly, they won't notice it. Like a total mathematician-y technique guy who, you know, might be like, oh, there's, you know, I mean, I don't know. But you won't. And really good people who might play to a metronome like that, if they come out and they're on 128th note ahead of it, they might be able to play to it and keep it. If you keep then the pulse, the click track, the metronome, the discrete note in its place while you're playing, it doesn't necessarily have to fall on a quarter note anymore. It can fall on the 128th note a little before, and you keep it relatively there. You're still playing relative to it in a nice equal amount of time. Okay, does that make sense? Huh. But the point for a practical purpose, though, you can slowly come back to the click and people won't hear. And here's a point I'm going to make. If you're going to play with people in the old days, everybody has to play to the click well. They do, or at least record to the click well, or at least I sometimes will get demos, or I should say more in the past, because I don't really get them anymore. But from a guitar player, hey man, would you put drums on my stuff? Or this track that I did, would you add drums to it? When you go, and you can hear, when you hear the recording, it sounds like it's solid. There's a couple spots you might be like, eh. But then when you go in and you really want to lay discrete notes on it, it has to be done just so, because at that point, you're putting the discrete notes to the guitar that exists, which then in and of itself is like a click track. It's a pre-existing thing. If that pre-existing guitar is beyond some kind of a threshold of timekeeping, not perfection, but within a range of, there's a certain range. All right, here's a good example. Bear with me. Sounds of Silence, or Sound of Silence. Simon and Garfunkel. They added the drums after the fact, okay? Simon and Garfunkel played the tune, and then some producer's like, you know what? Let's put a little pep in this baby. Let's put some drums on that track. So they got some guy in there, or gal, or whoever the hell it was. Maybe Carol Kay played the drums on it, okay? Or whoever. Put drums over it. But if you hear points there, it really speeds up, okay? And it really, there's certain spots where sort of the drums are a little stumbling around, a teeny bit if you really critically listen to it. Because they added the drums after the fact. What happens is in Musicberg, if somebody's playing a non-discrete instrument, okay, well, a piano can be discrete, but with chords and everything, but guitar strumming or just singing, la, da, 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 you won't really notice any sort of maybe waverings of consistent time they have, because it's a melodic thing. You're following the melody. You're not thinking about it in a pulse, okay? But as soon as you go to put drums on it, it can be problematic if the person... If there's a certain point where they're really kind of rush in, it's going to sound funky. It can make the drums sound like they're being played poorly, or that the drums have bad time. You're going to notice it first on the discrete instrument. And here's my point. Sometimes you'll even get, here's a good example. You get a singer-songwriter, they go and they play the guitar and they have a drum machine going. And they're playing, strumming over the top, and they're singing. Well, you'll hear points where they're kind of, if they don't really have the best time, they're kind of way ahead of it and then they're way behind. It sounds funky. Without really thinking about it, if you're following the melody, if you're not really paying attention, you're just following the melody. Oh, we're playing to a metronome, but not really doing it well, but whatever, it's my demo. It's going to sound like the perfect drum machine, or 808 or whatever it is. It's going to make it sound like it's not playing. It's going to make it kind of sound like it has bad time. It really will. It'll make it just, something doesn't sound right about it. And I can assure you, if there was a drummer playing on it, but was a robot and was playing, but you saw them playing to it. You're like, oh, the drummer's off. You would, oh, he's in it. No, you know what? Everything is relative. It is, okay? Check that out. I mean, I've seen, you won't really notice time discrepancies with an organic, with somebody just playing loose without any discrete things. You know, and that's not even necessarily if they're going to purposely rush, you know, pick up a chorus because they're emotional about it. I'm saying even if their intention is to play, they want to play it as smooth as silk, as solid as possible all the way through. If they play it organically without a drum machine or anything, it'll sound nice if they do a good thing. But if you go back and try to play drums to it, depending on how well they kept time, you'll notice it on a discrete. You will notice. You're more likely to notice it on drums because they're discrete notes. Okay. So my point is, what the hell is my point? Practice to a metronome. Again, you don't have to be on your instrument when you do it. Eventually you do. Of course, there are motor things that, you know, you have to, eventually you will be practicing with your hands. But my point is, at the very least, in the short run, if you've never really done it, do it without, you can do it without the drums, but I recommend doing it both, with and without. Because you really hear your interpreting time. Time, time, time. Get it in here. Here, here, here. Do you know what I'm saying? Really, you're in the car. You know what I'm saying? It's a great way to do it, okay? So, again, I will make a video with me playing, okay? Because it'll become... I'm trying to think of a really good example. Well, I have a lot of examples here in the house somewhere where a singer-songwriter's play into a drum machine or a click track, and you really hear them get behind. And I mean, it really does. Again, if you're not really paying attention, people not playing to a drummer or a drum machine, whether it's perfect time or not, you'll blame it on the drums first, because it is whenever there's a mismatch with something that's more fluid and melodic, with something that's discrete, I think it's in our nature to naturally blame it. Oh, the guy playing the discrete notes. Because they're immediately he's off, or she's off, okay? Again, even if it's a perfect click track, playing with a singer-songwriter that doesn't have really a great sense of time, okay? So don't be too hard on yourself. Again, learning to play with a metronome or practicing to a metronome, just imagine like when you first get on that bike and there's a yellow stripe in the Salt Lake Flats or whatever the hell it is, or a big asphalt paved parking lot, and you got, at first, if you panic about it, you're going to be trying to write and you're going to be looking down the whole time and oh, I'm off a little, oh wait, no, I'm on. You're going to be torturing yourself. After a while, what will happen is you relax and you'll just kind of start going, every so often you'll learn to sort of look at it a little bit out of the peripheral vision while you're doing it. And after a while, you're going to look down and you're going to, you know, people who do it long enough will approach perfection. They'll get better and better and better at it. So just do that, okay? There you go. Thanks for watching my videos. Please subscribe. Thank you.